Brent, imagine you're me and you're trying to manage some PPC campaigns, except you're spending the summer in Barcelona. How could I manage it and get all my tapas and wine in? These are real questions for a serious PPC manager.
Yeah, this is a real problem. Everyone you know is in Europe. Everyone's having a good time in Europe right now. You want to do the same. You're going to have to figure out how to manage your campaigns with just looking at a number of metrics instead of being in the spreadsheets, worrying about columns H through Z, doing the calculations yourself. You're going to
Speaking
say, "Hey,
of
team, I'm going to take some time."
speaking of Europe and everybody's in Europe, I made the trek all the way to Barcelona. We've got lots of mutual friends here in Barcelona, and yet you not in Barcelona. You're just down the street, I feel.
Sorry, my parents are in town.
You're just down the street. Isn't France right next to Spain?
It is right next to it. Yeah, we're basically neighbors. We're neighbors at the moment. But it's summer. A lot of things to do. A lot of relaxing to have happen.
How much have you shed your American skin living in Europe for so long? Like, you get into the office at 11:30 a.m., taking your 3 hour lunch at
Three
noon.
hour lunch. 3 hour lunch. I'm a fan of, but I will say, my whole life I've been an early riser. I think it's just something that's in your biology. Get up every day at like 6:30 or 7. That hasn't changed. The one thing that has changed, germane to this discussion, Mike, is when does a week start? To me, a week starts on Monday. Now, in the US, typically a week starts on Sunday, right? Our calendars, if you look at a wall calendar, anyone listening to this probably does not have a wall calendar, but if you look at one, it starts on a Sunday and goes through till Saturday, right? But in Europe, it usually starts on a Monday.
The Fahrenheit, Celsius metric system, imperial.
Yeah, the only one I struggle with is centimeters. Everything else I got figured out.
I feel like the hardest thing for me is 24-hour time. Like it's 14:27. No, it's not. Well, Brent, it is so nice to have you back on the show. I will be honest with you when I say I'm quite bummed that you did not make the trek to Barcelona this time around. It's like you coming to, it's like you going to Austin and me being like, I'm too busy right now. You're all
It's
the way
more like
in.
me coming to Louisiana and you being like, I can't come
Okay.
over.
um, but I am excited because today on the show, in Core, actually, we had a really cool discussion a couple of weeks ago about how would someone manage their campaigns, to get a pulse on their campaigns, to get a pulse on their Amazon business, to get a pulse on the people managing their campaigns. Potentially, they're going away on vacation for a week or two, and they're not going to be checking into their advertising campaigns, but they will be checking into a spreadsheet just to get a pulse on things, to send some directive to their team. That's the situation that we're faced with, which is a very real situation for a lot of people. PPC for a lot of people is a thing that hopefully, if you're listening to this show, you check daily. But what happens when you go on vacation and you want to just simply keep tabs on it? Maybe check in once a week, get a pulse, and then send a few notes back to your team, a few questions, and have simple, light correspondence. And I think it's such an interesting thought experiment because, one of our favorite reports from the last couple of years has been the Search Query Performance report. But like, imagine you didn't log in and look at it and sift through it and like combine it with other ones and like have this big thing. Like, what would be the one piece of information that you would need in order to get a pulse on things and, volley some questions back and forth with the team? And that's sort of the topic of today. And I absolutely really love this topic because it brings up management theory.
Yeah, the way I'd frame it is, if you're going to elevate and delegate in your business, I'm speaking now to the people that are business owners, which is probably many of the listeners of your podcast, right? What are the numbers that you can glance at every Wednesday, every Thursday, whatever day you pick? And you should stick to a weekly consistent schedule that's related to advertising and allows you to have that top level snapshot. And you know that, like, okay, all systems green. One light over here is yellow. Maybe we need to get that checked out. Nothing red this week. And then next week, same thing. Okay, we got a red light on over here on this particular metric. This is the um, inspiration for a conversation with the people who are actually managing this thing. I don't personally run PPC every day, all day, look at the campaigns anymore. That's someone else on my team's responsibility. Maybe that's an agency's responsibility. But I still want that status check dashboard. Lights are all green. If there's not one that's green, then we need to have a conversation. You could literally make it green, I guess, if you wanted to in the spreadsheet, but the one that we have in front of us here is not. But that's a basic like stoplight idea, and that's a form of management theory. Delegate, elevate, and then manage to a couple of key performance indicators that are agreed upon with you and the people whose primary responsibility is keeping those things in check.
I tended to talk once about how to efficiently manage a team, and that was the entire crux of the 35-minute talk, which was if you don't have a spreadsheet that your team is producing that color codes things red, yellow, green, and then like a series of action steps of what to do when a certain number is red or yellow, then like you're not managing anybody. And it was a pretty like at the crux of it, like there is a ton of truth on that. We're going to share a spreadsheet in just a little bit. And that goes over a lot of this. And it's true. If you were to get some of these metrics back every week, I think some of the most experienced business people I know, like Search Career Performance Report comes out, they're a brand owner. They're not excited to download the spreadsheet and sift through it and like figure out all the ways to manipulate it. They're looking at that to only discover like, well, what insight should I be getting from this on a regular basis to like increase my acumen in managing this business and growing this business. So therefore they will ask for that piece of it instead of working on manipulating it and working and sifting through and like separating all the figures.
Right. It's like systems thinking. It's essentially if they are made aware that there's an update, what they want to learn is okay, in that update, what is germane to what I'm interested in and what my use case is. I don't need to necessarily know about every single column or small feature or addition that's been made. You, as the person on my team managing that, looking at that, you tell me what the important part is and deliver that piece of information to me. You're right. The best people that I know, I can think of clients in my head. Some of their faces are coming into my mind right now, just thinking about it. They're the kind of ones who would ask me that question or ask our team that question. And you can tell that's the level that they're operating at.
So let's actually take a look at the spreadsheet. Let's take a look at the spreadsheet. So we are looking at a report that I call the Interstellar Amazon PPC Manager. Brent, I like to have a lot of fun. I like to be creative. So when I initially thought of the spreadsheet, the premise was not you're going on vacation and you need to get a pulse check on things, or you're working up your management hierarchy and your delegation hierarchy. So you're only going to look at a couple of core metrics and then ask the right questions to the team, which is true and accurate. But I initially had the idea, imagine you're on Mars and you don't have the bandwidth to log into Amazon and download reports, and you were forced to come up with this spreadsheet of information. What would it look like? So I call it the Mars report, which I do enjoy.
And it's a catchy name. It works. It really drives the point home. And I don't know if we're keeping it open in a tab in Google Chrome and hitting refresh and waiting for 5 hours, or if
Right.
we're just accepting a 30 kilobyte download. Unfortunately, Elon didn't get Starlink to work on Mars. He got us there, but we didn't get the connection hooked up properly.
Dang.
So we're just waiting 7 hours for that spreadsheet to download.
Dang.
However, it's got everything we need. So
It's
that's all
got
we need. One. It's one thing. It's all we need.
Yeah. So the if I was delegating something to my team, or if I'm a business owner and I'm delegating to my team and I'm trying to work my way up, I'm trying to get out of the report generation, I'm trying to get out of sifting through a bunch of data to try to find some insight, and I just want the end result of that. I'll say that there's a spectrum here. This might be more detail than someone might need. This might be not enough detail. But the whole premise here is that someone has prepared this report for you. So right off the bat, we have week selection. I do think it's valuable to get this kind of top level systems thinking information on a weekly basis. So I set this up for every week. And I was going to ask for this information to be prepared on Wednesdays using a Sunday to Saturday view. Is that a view that you would also take?
If I was looking at a US Amazon account, I think that is a view I would take because, like I mentioned earlier, just in this recording, this concept of when does a week start is like an important but kind of nuanced question. We kind of take it for granted in the US. Oh, well, you look at a calendar, it starts on
Hmm.
Sunday. I think Amazon works on Amazon time. I think they also work on US week
Right.
schedule, let's call it. I believe if you look at a French account or a UK account, I think that it starts on Monday. Now you can set the date slider to whatever you want, really, but
Right.
what's like the default in a lot of places? It's probably that Sunday through Saturday. And I think talking to other people in core and some other people just who we both know, that's probably what they would pick. Then
Right.
the question is, how long do you have to wait for the data to settle?
Yeah, there's this concept of re-attribution, meaning you go and you get the information again, meaning you have to go and get not just the most recent week, but also potentially like previous weeks. So if I was organizing the spreadsheet, I'd actually have the person preparing it go back and get the previous 4 weeks, so last week, and then the previous three before that, to account for the full 30-day reattribution. Now, in some businesses, that number's pretty big. Like if you look at how much revenue you have today, tomorrow you'll have very little revenue, and then you look at it a week later, it'll be a whole bunch more, and then you look
Hmm.
at it 31 days later, and it'll be a lot more. For some businesses, that figure is greater, and for other businesses, that number is more insignificant.
Yeah.
So,
And if you know what it is for your business, that probably means you'll have a good understanding of how you need to recalibrate that for this kind of operation. If you have a product that has a long buying cycle, is more costly, people add it to the cart or a wish list and they forget about it. They do a lot of comparison shopping. Maybe they've clicked on an ad and they buy it 2 weeks later. Entirely possible for some ad types for it to be attributed later. That's totally normal.
right,
If your product is $25, maybe not.
right, and that revenue goes back in time. Someone clicks on the first of the month, doesn't buy until the 10th of the month. That revenue gets sent back to that ad campaign on the first.
And you probably deal with this all the time at Ad Badger, right? You guys are having to re-request data, reissue numbers, and yeah, I bet you
Big
have
time.
people who say, "Why did my figures change by 4.5%?" Well, the reason is attribution, and
Right.
maybe a whole different topic for a different podcast. But attribution, even when it's in a closed environment like this, I think of Amazon advertising and the Amazon ecosystem as a very kind of insular, closed environment where it's easy to account for a lot of things. Even then, I would still never say that attribution is 100% correct. When you start bringing in things like sponsored display, you start raising questions about what is a click versus a view conversion. This gets much more confusing, but I think that's outside of the scope of this spreadsheet. We're focused on we're
Yeah.
focused on the easy to understand numbers.
So the very, very first thing that I would look at are these sort of first columns. And of this, there's 8 of them. I would just look at the week number, the date of the Sunday that I'm starting at, and then I would simply have ad spend, ad revenue, ACOS, total business revenue, ad cost of total sales, also known as ACOTS, also known as tacos for some reason, and then organic revenue. And yes, Brent, I will die say feeling very proud that whoever started calling it tacos was completely wrong. Why I caught on, I still have no idea. It's the total sales, not the total ad cost of
Yeah, I
sales.
mean, Mike, unfortunately, it has caught on. It's there's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law, right?
Right.
So we have the spirit of the law here, which is tacos, and we know why it caught on. You live in Austin; it's because tacos are delicious. That's
There's
why it caught on.
fair enough. Fair enough. But the why did I pick these metrics as some of the first ones that I would look at? I'm curious on your thoughts of I consider this to be sort of the top level, meaning if you're incredibly busy and you don't want to go further, I would at least look at these figures. And the reason being is because you will be able to track so much just with 6 numbers every single week. You'll be able to track how much you're ad spending, how much revenue is coming from that, the ratio of that, your ACOS, and how much total business revenue you got that week. So it's actually just 3 metrics, and the rest you sort of calculate. So you just get ad spend, ad revenue, and total business revenue. And then from that, you can calculate your ACOS, you can calculate your ad cost to total sales, and you can calculate your organic revenue. So because your organic revenue is simply total revenue minus ad revenue. Technically, you might have other sources of revenue. It's just non-ad revenue, like maybe you sent an email blast to people.
Other.
Right. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode as much as I know I am. I love talking with Brent. One thing I'll mention about this sheet is that we actually have this sheet as part of our Amazon PPC checklist, which we update periodically when we release new tools, new features, and new concepts. We've got everything organized in whichever way you would need it. If you wanted to get a glimpse into our beginner SEO or our advanced SEO strategies, managing PPC budgets, so on and so forth, we have categorized and described each episode at a high level. You can actually get this specific spreadsheet, which I'm calling the CEO dashboard. You can get it right there. It's currently near row 30. If you can't find it, just go ahead and search CEO dashboard, and you will get a copy of this. Just click the link and copy the sheet. I hope you enjoy it. If you're interested in going a little bit further, we've got versions of this information inside our Ad Badger software, which I'd also love to talk with you about. I love talking to people that listen to the show about our tool because you guys really get it. Have a good one, and let's get back to the episode. So basically, with just these numbers, tracking them week over week, you get incredible insight to your business. The things that jump out as me is our advertising becoming more or less efficient? If it is becoming less efficient, meaning I'm increasing the ACOS, am I getting subsequent weeks of improved organic revenue? Like we're bidding harder, we're going more aggressive. Did that lead to more organic revenue? Why or why not? Conversely, if I'm getting more efficient with my ACOS, I can understand why. How is that impacting my organic revenue? How is that impacting my total business revenue? How is that impacting my ad cost of total sales? So just with these numbers, I think you get a really nice picture. If I were to add one more here, I might do total profit of the company as well. But yeah, what do you think of these? What would be your sort of first top level metrics that you would look at?
Well, I agree with all of these, no question. I think these six columns are great. The only thing that I might add, I know you said, what did you say, total profit? How about delta or percentage change? Something like that, just to get a quick idea of what direction things are moving in week to
Right.
week as part of the snapshot. I love a percentage change when I look at software, when I look at spreadsheets that we create for clients, when I look at reports we create for clients. Love to see percentage change, right? So like,
Yeah.
okay, how much should it go up or down by? And yeah, particularly interesting in like days like we had recently, like Prime. Okay, that
Right.
data is obviously extremely selective and skewed because there you go. You just put one in live. Fantastic. So delta there from week 1 to week 2,
Right.
20% increase in ad spend. Okay, cool. Good to know. I'm a big fan of that.
That's cool. Yeah, and you can even set the spreadsheet up like if you were to shrink this a little bit so it doesn't take up too much room. And then yeah, exactly that. Every single row you would just sort of have your so as I'm looking at revenue, I'd see the revenue change week over week. I would see everything just sort of move in a particular direction, which would be really cool.
Yeah,
So
it
like
allows
how
you to
much?
do a comparison, like the columns you just added there. So, okay, we increased ad spend by 21%, but ad revenue only went up 10%. Maybe
Right.
those two things are out of whack. Maybe that should be a bit higher for ad revenue
Right.
because we increased, accordingly. Does that mean that where we added spend was not as efficient? Was it some ad type that didn't do as well? Is there some other reason for that? Those are all points for further interrogation with your team.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're doing the exercise, and if I just jot some numbers on here,
Mm-hmm.
4,500 in total business revenue, 5,400 in total business revenue. How about 64, 18, 48 in total business revenue? Because you're absolutely right. As soon as you begin to see these percent changes, it becomes really interesting, um, really fast. Because all of a sudden I can see exactly to your point. Oh, okay, here we are. Oh, this week we decreased ad spend by 30%, but actually ad revenue went up 8%. Our ACOS got went from 41 to 26. That's fantastic. I would be asking questions like, hey team, like what happened this week? Can we attribute this to anything? Those kinds of questions would be really valuable at helping you get a better sense, helping train your team to point out the things that you find valuable in the company as well. So yeah, this kind of thinking of like seeing it week over week, it's incredible.
And I think the beauty of it in this first part here is this could be all you need actually. I mean,
Right.
we have a lot of columns in this sheet, but maybe for some people you would start here and then build on it as necessary. Maybe you don't actually care about sponsored products ad spend, although some people definitely do want to see that. They want to see that breakdown
Right.
ratio.
Right. Um, Now, what's interesting about this is depending on how involved one wants to be, depending on their bandwidth and their interests and their energy, um, you would then potentially add more. And I think ultimately you begin to ask yourself questions of, well, what's the composition of that metric? And then you unfurl it. It's almost like a rope that you are pulling apart where, it's one piece made up of several different strands, and then you begin to peel out extra strands. So you would ask yourself, okay, I have ad spend, I'm spending 500 through 50, 415 a week. What's the composition of that ad spend? Meaning, where am I spending it? And then on the sheet, I added a whole bunch of columns for composition of ad spend. So, like, how much am I spending on sponsored product? How much am I spending on sponsored brand? How much am I spending on sponsored display? And what's the performance of each of them? So now all of a sudden, I have one level deeper. So again, I had the top level, which I consider this to be, foundational. And then I just took that first metric, ad spend and ad revenue, and I said, well, what's contributing to that? What is my sponsored product, sponsored brand, sponsored display performance individually? And I would that be your next move? Like, what do you think of that next thought process where like now I'm teasing out ad spend and ad revenue into its individual components?
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think you need to see what the mix is. What's the mix in your gas tank here? You got a couple different octane levels driving your engine. So, are we looking at 95% sponsored products? That would be good to know. I'd be curious about that. The only thing I might be cautious of with sponsored display, we all know Amazon has the view and click attribution. I think you would probably need to make a clear um, mandate to the
Right.
team to say, hey, let's calculate for click attribution here. Make sure to pull the right reports for that. And why don't we talk about view attribution as a separate column? And then
Right.
maybe whatever that SDA cost is there could perhaps be calculated with two different columns instead of
Right.
just looking at one. I think there is value in view conversions and view tracking. This is a very controversial topic in our
Right.
community, in our space. But I think it probably deserves to have a separate column or like broken out there.
Big time. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so clicks versus views. Exactly. Some may even say, hey, why don't we look at video versus non-video for
Right.
sponsored brands? But there's a lot of, I mean, if you start going down that rabbit hole, you can go down many different versions of sponsored brands because we now have so many different creative types available there to benefit from.
Well, I think to your point, you could take any of these and tease them out further. Sponsored products you can split up, sponsored brands you can split up, sponsored
Mhm.
display you can split up. So it the exercise here is really showing people that you can get immense insight into the operation of your Amazon PPC without actually logging in. So you can build these spreadsheets, and again, in a perfect world, you're having someone else build these for you, which would allow you to just sort of sit, receive the report, and then scroll left to right. Where it's like, okay, this is what I'm spending. Okay, I'm spending a lot less. My revenue went up. Let me find out why. So then you can scroll to the right and see like where did that improvement in ACOS happen? Where did I really gain traction? And then you can begin to ask questions about that, and you can sort of get this information. And what I also think is great, a lot of people, they might hire someone from Fiverr or Upwork or an agency. They might hire someone and then have trouble understanding what's going on. They might have trouble working with them, or maybe it's an in-house person. They don't know exactly how to manage them. That person who they're hired probably loves this sheet in the sense of it tells the story to the client in a way that is really, really clear, in a way that they can understand. So it's like, okay, results got worse this week. Where did they get worse? Okay, as you can see, sponsored product got worse. Well, what part of sponsored product got worse? And depending on, the desire, or who you're talking to, uh, a lot of it, like, that tells the story incredibly efficiently for people. Um,
Yeah, and Mike, another idea that I'd love, which I really stress with my team when talking to clients, is that we need to all have a common source of truth.
right.
So if a client's looking at their account and they're saying, "Oh, the ad revenue went down a lot," and then
Yes.
we log in and we look at it and we say, "Oh, no, it didn't. It went up." Well, are we looking at the same date range? Do we have the same
Yeah.
filters applied? Do we have the same? Are we in the same account? Maybe they're in the French account. We're in the UK account. Whoops.
Truly.
There's
Hmm.
a lot of things there that it's just like unnecessary back and forth, room for confusion. If we all have a sense of, or sorry, like a common source of truth, I call it like ground truth. It's like this is the one place we're all looking. Well, we've agreed that this is reality. So then the next thing we need to do is have a discussion about that piece of reality.
Right.
And there's not quibbling over, oh no, you guys entered the data wrong, or this is that. No, we can all agree that this is the thing we're going to talk about. Um, I guess another place we can think about this for is a quick shout out SKU economics report, which I know we talked about recently. That is built into the inventory area. You can download it from the reports area, but that is also another source of ground truth. If you add COGS and you add some other advertising costs in there, but that is a place where you can talk to a client, or you can look at your business and talk to whoever's managing ads and say, okay, the sponsored products costs are accounted for in this report. That's great.
Hmm.
Let's look at the SKUs and figure out what our contribution margin is, our net profit is, whatever you want to call it. Now that we've all established that is fact, let's have a discussion around that.
Right. I love that, because how often is it that people on the same team are having different opinions about how things are going, because one person downloaded one sheet and saw this thing for this time frame,
Yeah.
somebody else downloaded a different sheet over a different time frame and saw a different thing, and they have completely different worlds of understanding. So having something like this, again, incredibly valuable. Wrangle in all the stakeholders and run through what's going to be relevant to everybody, depending on their scale. And it might just be the business owner is only interested in these metrics, the highest level one, and they might not want to go a step deeper into the breakout of sponsored products, brands, display, or maybe they might, because my point is, it takes very few seconds to say, okay, we spent $350 this week. What was the composition of it in terms of the different ad types? Okay, sponsored product, sponsored brand, sponsored display. Okay, that's great. Oh, I see we spent a lot on sponsored brands. What was the composition of that? And then they can just quickly unfurl sponsored brands, and then they can see, okay, all the different kinds of sponsored brands, we spent this much, and this is performing well or bad. Oh, what's the plan to improve that underperforming sponsored brands area? And then,
Right.
like, you can have a
That's where the
specific.
discussion should take off, right?
Right.
Because if you have the numbers in front of you and everyone agrees that's what the numbers are, the discussion is no longer, and this is what I see in like the worst client calls that we've had at Pathfinder over the years, where it's like we're just telling them what the spend is. Well, that's
Right.
not really a discussion. That's not like a way to progress the account. What we should focus on is the issues and improvements. So, like, okay, what's a problem? We've highlighted it because we see this. We can all agree on that. Now, what do we do about it? That what do we do about it part is the actual substantive discussion that needs to take place, along with the, okay, this has gone quite well. We can see by column K, this like went up, this went down.
Right.
That was what we were looking for. How do we do more of that? How do we pour that on thicker?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So many times, maybe as a report gets presented with very few metrics, but a lot of design, it could be difficult to, people look at a chart and, like, potentially, like, maybe it slightly looks like it's trending down for someone and slightly trending up for someone else. It's just helpful to have it in this format. So I love this conversation. A couple other things, I'm going to jump ahead
Sure.
to, like, thinking really high level. I think the last three columns that I wrote are really interesting. So, search query performance in Amazon brand analytics is one of the coolest reports ever, because it tells you first party how many times something was searched, for each keyword, how many times was it searched, and how many purchases came as a result from that. It's really valuable information, that Amazon tells you that information. And it also gives you some market analysis. Tells you how many purchases there were for everybody for this entire search term. So every single
Right.
brand, how many
Right.
purchases came from that, and then what's your percentage? Now, if you think about it, let's say you're gonna have just 10 SKUs. There's normally like 1,000 rows per product. So like they'll list like the top 1,000 or so. Um, and what's crazy about that is if you had 10, like that's 10,000 rows. And if you're trying to manage your Amazon marketing and get a pulse on your Amazon marketing from a high level, I actually think like the thing that you really want is just these 3 columns. Each week, I'd want to know how many purchases for terms for my brand were there total. So like every single brand out there, how many purchases were there? How many did we get? And what was our percentage of the total sales? But just 3 columns for the entire brand. And then if you want, you can go a step further and say, well, for each product, where was the dip, right? That report can get massive. But for the most part, I just want to know like what is my brand share every single week? And I believe that just these 3 columns would give it to you in a way that would be incredibly clear. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that in a way, you could almost take these three and put them at the front, if that's your thinking, right? It's like, let's put these up right in the front. So their columns C through E almost.
Wow.
um, I don't know, maybe an alternative
Right.
method for doing this.
Right.
Uh, but essentially, you're trying to just gauge market share, right? What is your market share?
Right.
And for larger brands, for more mature brands, for people that are thinking at a higher level, that is something that they're probably interested in. Because what is ad spend? What is the point of ad spend? Why are we looking at A costs?
Mm.
And what are we trying to do? We're trying to like eat into the market share of competitors. We're trying to
Mm.
make sure that we're maintaining the market share that we do have. And this is one of the metrics we have for doing that. Now, there's other ways to calculate market share with like third-party tools, right? I'm not sure if any of those are really accurate, actually,
Right.
but maybe they're directionally accurate, if not precise.
Right. But yeah, I think this is so fascinating because I've done plenty of hours of content on like all the bajillion things you can do with your search query performance report and like all these different ways to manipulate it and whatnot. But like if you're just trying to wake up and get a pulse on your business and you don't want to dig around and all these things, like I would just want to know, like, and then the report would sort of make itself. Like, let's say there was 459 total purchases, um, and then if you were to track this over 3 weeks, then there were 299, and there were 320. Like if this were these many total purchases, for whatever reason, that these numbers are really low. But imagine there, and then imagine you had you know this many, and it would just allow you to just understand like where you stack up in the industry, and then you'd be able to measure your share of all this stuff.
Yeah, simple as that.
Hmm. And it would just help you have conversations about how is everything going. Hey, what did we do this week that took us up to 30% brand share of orders? um,
Well, that's another question, isn't it, Mike? Is like if you look at all the other columns in the same row, would you be able to determine which particular thing, which other metric moved? That was the one that actually caused AX here, the column we're looking at, to
yeah.
be higher or lower. That is maybe a tougher point to interrogate because maybe you don't know sometimes.
Right.
But you can try your best to read the tea leaves and figure it out.
Yeah, I sort of had this. This sheet is mostly blank, right? I was thinking of the metrics more than like filling it out, but filling it out actually really gets the gears going. Because to your point, absolutely, like, hey, what did we do this week where we jumped up to 30% of brand sales this week? What happened there? And potentially, you can go and you can scroll to the left, and you'd be able to look at, oh, we had a lot more sponsored display that week. Does sponsored display like help boost our total profitability and our total brand share? Like you begin to have
Mm.
conversations like that. So I think like having this filled out, I think is hyper valuable.
I think Amazon would love you to come to the conclusion, Mike, that spending on sponsored
Uh,
display makes your makes
right,
your percentage of sales just skyrocket. You just
right,
take over the marketplace. Yeah.
right. A couple other examples that I thought were really fascinating was like think of search term impression share rank. And for those that don't know, search term impression share rank is of all the advertisers advertising on a particular search term. Uh, did you get the most impressions? Did you get the second most impressions? Did you get the third most impressions? So on and so forth. And I think I think basically what this exercise was basically like all the reports inside Amazon. What is the one thing I'm trying to get from it? And I feel like with the search term impression share
Hmm.
report, all I'm trying to get is, am I not in position one or two for my search terms that are better than target ACOS? Right? Like simple things like that, where it's just like this number in a perfect world better be 100% or like 90% higher, meaning how many search terms am I in top position for uh, with that? And then if it's not, I can then begin to have conversations like, are we managing bids properly? If you try to increase bids too high, do we lose our ACOS comfort level? So
Right.
I was just thinking
Right.
of like all of the things that can tell me information with just one number without having to download and look at the report.
Because the action step here, if I'm understanding correctly, is if you're below your target ACOS and you're not somewhere in a high rank, you can definitely afford to push to
Right.
try to make sure that you're going to show up in the STIS with a
Right.
higher rank.
Right. So it's like giving you action. It's like one number that just goes and gives action because you can look at it and you can be like, hey, go juice it up type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So those kinds of things I'm really fascinated by.
Is there one other in here that we had, Mike, which is your classic ratio? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. ACOS
Z.
power
Oh,
ratio.
what the best letter Z.
Yeah.
Z for those of you in Europe. ACOS
Yeah.
power ratio.
ACOS power ratio, just giving you the ratio of your ACOS of your account versus your ACOS of converting spend, seeing how far apart those things are. I think it's just one number that tells you a lot. If your ACOS power ratio, if your account level ACOS is like 60%, and then your ACOS of converting spend only, the things that actually got orders, is like 10%. That's like a 6x ratio. That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
That would tell me the account is maybe way too loose, and we really need to trim the fat and like change up our match types and scale things down, switch a lot of things over to exact and kill some autos and stuff like that.
Yeah, that remains for the record. That remains one of my absolute favorite metrics just in general.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're using it as much as we should at Pathfinder, if I'm honest with you. I've definitely taught the team about it once or twice, and we've talked about it here and there. But that metric alone would be one that gives you a snapshot of the composition of the account without actually having to look at the composition of the account. So that makes it a very useful contribution for this.
Yeah, so that is the spirit of this, and I'm curious. I'll just quickly run through mm, just like the other things on here. So I have like the contributing things to get the ACOS power ratio, like ad spend with no orders,
Hmm.
um, ACOS of converting spend only. Another thing that I really like is negative keyword to positive keyword ratio. Like how many negative keywords do we have to our positive keywords? Um, I like that number to be really high. A lot of accounts that I was looking at that are big, beefy, and low ACOS had like 30 times more negative keywords than positive keywords. Um, I thought that was really interesting. Other things on here is like account composition, like how many keywords do we have with 0 orders, 1 order, 2 orders, or 3 or more orders? That tells me a little bit about, are we too loose? Like, does anything need to be resegmented or segmented further? Um, yeah, just a lot of metrics that give me a pulse on things. And like, do you think I'm missing anything?
Yeah, actually, the only other thing I can think of would be, and it's because I'm a real sucker for this. I love them. Storefronts, Amazon storefronts. So, what percentage of your revenue, how much revenue is coming through the storefront? Usually that's from sponsored brands, but that can mean just a really effective storefront in general. People do arrive at the Amazon storefront from Google search, other search engines, I suppose. and within the Amazon ecosystem too. So there's more and more stats that are inside the storefront in the insights area, I believe it's called, right? That's their like basic version of analytics. So I'd like to know how much is coming through there. Now, in our calculations from our clients, we just did this recently. It's anywhere between like 4 to 7% for a storefront. That's like a pretty normal percentage. If you have it optimized really well and you spend a bunch on sponsored brands, you can get it 10% or higher. Some of our clients have 15% or higher because they emphasize it. But it's very few people I find actually track this, think about it, know what their number is. Pretty rare. So that'd be nice to have in there.
I think the big takeaway for me is for someone to really think about how they want to interact with their Amazon PPC. And if you're a business owner, you might just want to receive these first few columns on a weekly basis and understand it from there. And any probing questions that you ask beyond that, you'd be okay with not going any deeper on it. So like your ad spend changes, you can ask your team, why is the ad spend changing? And be okay with their response. If you are the type of person that would just want that extra information, think about each metric and then peel it out, try to separate the strands, unweave that rainbow, so to speak. And then, what is the total profit? I'm sorry, what is the ad spend composition of all of the ad spend, different campaign types. Then if you want to go even further of the campaign, what about the ad group types of all these campaigns? Just like keep going further and further down to a point that you feel most comfortable with.
Well, it's possible to make this many, many more columns and
Right.
rows, but I think the balance you want to strike as a business owner here is, yet again, if we're on Mars, going back to the origin of the idea you came up with, is how big can this file really be until we say
Right.
this is unwieldy and there's too much in here for me. Someone might, take a copy of this file and they might delete half of it, or they might
Yeah.
say, "Oh no, there's not nearly enough in here. I need to add 10 more columns of things that I thought of, calculations that me and my team have used for years that I love."
Yeah.
That's great. Go for it.
Yeah. I love it. So I love thinking in systems. This was a really exciting and energizing system for me to think about. I'm thinking of metrics in my own company, trying to simplify them. I would say over the years, was leaning too much into lots and lots of sheets, quantifying everything. I think I'm well over 50 tracked metrics. And the utility goes down because you don't have the bandwidth to study them. So understanding like what to receive, what to have a team build, how to ask the right questions, like what is the pyramid of what is the flow chart of questions that someone's asking. I think
And how
it's
can you
all
manage
important
to it?
conversations. Yeah.
How does it help you set a stage for further exploration and discussion?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I encourage people to go on their own interstellar journey, which, if you were to ask me, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Well, Mike, you know how I feel about that.
It's a perfect blend of emotion, action, sci-fi, excitement,
I agree with
interesting
all that.
story.
I agree with
Yeah.
all that. It just has too much Matthew McConaughey in it. I'm sorry.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Dang.
Not a
That's
fan.
tough. That's
Not
tough.
a fan.
That's tough. What is it about him?
I just don't believe him when he's acting. I just
Whoa.
don't believe him.
You see Matthew.
Yeah, I see Matthew. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
Many
Maybe
people
it's
say
just
that
he's
about,
just too good looking and I just can't handle it. Yeah.
Many people say that about The Rock now.
They just see The Rock every time.
So The
Well,
Rock
if your name is The Rock, it's kind of
Right.
like you're building a brand on being very recognizable. I mean, a lot of people are named Matthew, so not a lot of people are named The Rock.
Well, Brent, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We've got a bunch of links of yours in the description. You've got your LinkedIn. You've got your company website.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You still have Brent. You still have Brent.bike.
I do. Brent.bike. Make sure to put a www dot before that. Otherwise, some browsers don't recognize that it's a URL. You know what? It's hard being cutting edge, Mike. They'll catch up one day. But yes, it is possible to buy a .bike TLD, which I did right away for my name. And that's just my personal site. That's got everything on it.
Yes.
If you want to find me
including
on
your Strava.
Including my Strava, which is by far the most important social network that I'm on. So follow me on Strava.
We could be cycling through the hills of Barcelona.
Oh, now you're just teasing me.
Right now. As I understand, it's like the Wrigley Field of cycling.
Yes. Well, specifically Girona to the north of there is definitely one of the legendary hotspots for, pro cyclists and amateurs that think they're pro cyclists like me. So yes, that is true.
For a glimpse into who I am, we had a mutual friend who's a long time cycler, and I was like, "How hard could cycling be?" I'm fit. I go running, and he took me up into these hills north of Barcelona, and was literally circling me on the way up. Um, and it wasn't from cardiovascular exhaustion; it was from legs. My legs just got tired. I was watching, I kid you not, senior citizens passing me on like Huffies, and I had rented this like extraordinary beast of a bike that probably out of the gate, I don't know, is pushing $10,000. Like this
Yeah.
rental shop at the
Yeah,
most
you
insane.
rented like the Lamborghini, and they were in like the Fiat manual
Yeah,
Fiat from 1993,
just
and they were just
passing me at
passing
the
you. Yeah.
yeah.
Although I heard from that mutual friend, he said you acquitted yourself quite nicely, actually. So you got high marks.
Yes, nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brent. I will toast to you tonight over my croquettes. It's a popular food here.
Sounds good, man. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Brent. Bye bye.
Bye.